Thank you so much for joining us. So a warm welcome to AI Beyond STEM. That's science, technology, engineering, and maths, and digital skills to unleash the power of data science and AI. I'm your host, David Beavan. I'm lead research software engineer in the Turing's Research Software Engineering Group. And tonight's session is coming at you from the Alan Turing Institute in London, where we're the National Centre for Data Science and AI. And it's an amazing place to be, and so much research and innovation is happening here. This event is part of a Living with Machines distributed conference, and Living with Machines is one of the largest humanities research projects ever funded in the UK, and it's rethinking the Industrial Revolution and what it means for people to be alive at that time. We're grateful for our funder, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, which is part of UK Research and Innovation, so without them, tonight could not be happening at all. And of course, grateful to our project partners as well. So that's the Alan Turing Institute, the British Library, Queen Mary University of London, University of East Anglia, University of Exeter, University of Cambridge, and King's College London. And I have to get those name checks in there. Okay, so what's happening tonight? I'm going to introduce these amazing people next to me very shortly, very briefly, and then I'll turn to them and I will introduce them more fully, and you'll hear from them for 5 minutes each. So from left to right, we have Lydia France, Katie Ireland, Mathilde Daussy-Renaudin, Kaspar Beelen, and Nicole Coleman. I wish to say thank you very much to all of them. Now we're going to hear from each of them for 5 minutes each, and I've asked them to think about what are the opportunities in their areas and their disciplines for AI and data science, any unique challenges about those disciplines, and what skills need to be developed so AI can really make the most of its impact in those disciplines. So, whilst you're listening to everybody and thinking, I hope, please do use the chat functionality in Zoom to ask the panel questions. Direct your question to individuals if that's appropriate, or the whole panel. Your questions will come to me on a handy little iPad, and I will relay them to the audience. So this is very much about engagement, and I want to keep the conversation going. So at that point, it'll be over to you in the audience, but now, if you're sitting comfortably, now we're going to begin. So first up is Lydia France. Lydia is a research data scientist within the Research Engineering Group at the Alan Turing Institute, and also associate researcher at the Zoology Department at the University of Oxford. Lydia's been research engineering lead of a project called Accelerating AI for Arts and Humanities, which has involved multiple open software collaborations in the wider UK. Her biology research studies the natural learning of birds in flight, and Lydia is interested in how AI can be used for natural history, truly interdisciplinary research that goes beyond university departments, and how we can teach data science and reproducibility for researchers beyond the hard STEM subjects. So Lydia, tell us all about it in 4 minutes.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, so I work here in the Alan Turing Institute in the Research Engineering Group. One of the great things about the Reg is that we come from a really wide range of different disciplines, and we also work in interesting disciplines as well. So you might be working in something you've never worked in before. And so during Accelerating AI in Arts and Humanities, I was working on projects to do with Scottish Gaelic and also the arts up in Edinburgh as well. And I think one of the great things about seeing how AI is used beyond the kind of hard STEM subjects is that we start to see really cool collaborations between people who haven't really been involved in the AI conversation from the forefront. So it's really exciting to work in really varied groups. My research that started in zoology as well, although biology is one of the hardest STEM subjects, there's still quite a long way to go in terms of technical research and computational skills. A lot of those are lacking. Undergraduates are not taught things like programming. And so throughout my PhD, I had to teach myself a lot of the skills that I now use all the time in my job. And I've also done quite a lot of teaching for biologists, but also psychologists, some lawyers at one point, and also historians as well. And one of the things we see is that even across all these different disciplines, people are really excited about AI and really want to use it in their research, but they haven't had the hard skills from the beginning, and there's a big gap in confidence. So people wanting to get out there and start using really exciting techniques, but not having the kind of background skills. And so I've been really interested in how to teach these kinds of people who have got high enthusiasm but low technical background. Yeah, I think one of the really cool things about natural history as well is you've got massive collections in the Natural History Museum in London, for example, which are not only a historical record in themselves, because they show where people were going in the world and what kind of animals lived at that period in history, maybe 100, maybe 200 years ago. So actually they are an important record of history as well as being useful for biologists. And so digitization of those kinds of records is really critical for evolution and also biodiversity questions. So there's a lot going on at the Natural History Museum that I've seen that's been really exciting. So there's very cool applications for AI in many, many fields.
Thank you, Lydia. And I take away high enthusiasm. I mean, it's lovely to work with high enthusiasm people.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Okay, give Lydia your questions, use the Zoom chat. Please listen to the others as well. Okay, so next up, we welcome Katie Ireland. Katie is head of DigiLab at the University of Georgia, and that's the state, not the country. She recently completed her PhD in linguistics, and her research focuses on corpus linguistics and language variation, and is often very interdisciplinary in her work. And she has forthcoming articles in Berkeley Technology Law Journal, the Law and Linguistics of Social Platforms Terms of Use. So that's all the terms of use bits that you never read, you just click accept. And in Applied Corpus and Linguistics. Katie's work at the DigiLab involves digital skills training and project support for faculty and students across the university, regardless of their discipline. Katie, tell us about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to get to be here with you all. So like Lydia, during my PhD, I did not have the technical background or expertise. And so I had to teach myself and work with other researchers to get those skills. So being able now to work in different methods with data science and digital tools, it's still not enough, actually. It's not enough to be able to use cool methods, but we need our disciplinary expertise to bring to those methods to ask different research questions. So something that I'm very passionate about with getting to work in the DigiLab is actually training different people with using their disciplinary backgrounds and area of expertise with those methods. And so that enables researchers to also be able to interrogate the methods, to interrogate their research questions, and also think more carefully about their data. Where is their data coming from? What are more interesting questions that the tools can be applied to? My background is also in linguistics, as Dave mentioned, and that's something that I think is a really interesting example of disciplinary expertise, because linguists really understand how language works in society, in communities, and with individuals. So that's something that, say, maybe a certain large language model or people working with a certain large language model could learn from, like, I don't know, ChatGPT. So yeah, digital skills training is really important regardless of the discipline, but each area of discipline has their own unique skills and background that is still certainly valid and offers a lot to AI and data science research.
Thank you, Katie. I'm hearing untapped potential for collaborations here.
That's right.
And maybe we can dig into ChatGPT later. Thank you so much, Katie. Next up, we have Mathilde at Daussy-Renaudin. Mathilde, welcome, who's a PhD candidate at University College London and the Oxford's History of Science Museum as a collaborative doctoral award program. Mathilde's research focuses on how to display the History of Science Museum's collection of astronomical instruments in an engaging, relevant, and fun way for visitors, making it understandable and accessible. That's a lot going on there. Mathilde's interested in how AI and machine learning can be invested in museums to develop new tools, sustaining visitors' curiosity and engagement, and how these opportunities can help build more layers of interpretations for objects and reinforce accessibility for all in the galleries. Tell us about skills in AI.
Yes,
Mathilde, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank thank you for having me here. So I come from a very museological background, which is seen as very analog because it's more about physical space, being in physical space and seeing the real thing, the objects. But actually, AI is already in museums, like a lot. It's used in various departments in museums, ranging from collection management, visitors, flux, or analysis or reviews analysis, and visitor engagement. That's what I'm most interested in. There are already a lot of existing projects like translator robots, for instance, that really allow like accessibility for all and diversity of visitors, visit assistants as well, interfaces like recognition that will pair some pictures with other pictures, so allow engagement and foster curiosity, and also in-gallery learning assistance, for instance, helping engaging visitors, especially young visitors, with like interfaces or even some experiments. And so there are a lot of challenges in the museum field with AI because each museum is very different. So I think like we want to be focused on relevance and we want to develop things with aim and meaning and not fall into the gimmick pitfall. That's something that I'm quite not worried about, but I'm really putting an attention on that. Also ethics, because is AI always the best option for what we want to do? Because it's really easy to see the benefits. For instance, AI translation assistants are very handy and very useful, but even those who are answering, I don't know, mundane questions, but the most important thing, I think, is the link between the visitors and the objects and the space. And this is what we should always try to build on and, again, avoid like gimmicks. But that being said, there are many, many existing possibilities. For instance, I'm thinking about co-curation. For instance, each visitor could add its own layer of interpretation to an object. And I think this could be something really exciting for the future of museums. Just a little caveat, because also we need to take into account those biases, right? And just to have an expertise in the field to know when something is pertinent, relevant, or if it's just like, you know, how would you call that? Like the sound in the background, So I think what should be developed is, again, interdisciplinarity, just to be able to talk to each other, because very often museum people have great ideas, but not a lot of ideas to who we could ask for help, for instance. But there are some good networks that are building. Here, for instance, there is the Museum Plus AI from the University of London with a lot of things they offer. So I think that's a very exciting time to be in for museums.
Thank you. And what strikes me is that you can have multiple perspectives on the same object. It means different things to different people, to different cultures. And that's something that perhaps AI doesn't always do. As ever, give us your feedback in the Zoom chat. Thank you very much. Okay, next up, thank you, Mathilde. Next up, we have Kaspar Beelen. Kaspar currently works as Technical Lead Digital Humanities at the Technical Lead Digital Humanities, there should be a comma in there, shouldn't there, at the School of Advanced Study, University of London, and is still, in Kaspar's word, kind of active as a research associate at the Alan Turing Institute. Thank you, Kaspar. It kind of welcomes you. Where Kaspar's been contributing to the Living with Machines project, and his background is in history, but he's been playing with code and data for almost a decade now, and worked as digital humanities researcher within many contexts. Today, Kaspar's going to go back to his academic roots a bit for us and think about what data science and AI mean for history and vice versa. Take it away, Kaspar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, for the introduction. And sorry for the very complex noun phrase of the title. Should work on it.
It's late.
But yeah, I think today what I would like to focus on, so I was wondering what identity I should kind of perform here or what discipline to represent. And I think I would like to focus on history. And more specifically, I would like to think more a bit like what skills are actually needed to bring history and data science and AI together in a more fruitful collaboration. And also doing this, touching a bit on the challenges and opportunities. And to start with a bit of background, historians somehow have been less eager to adapt data science, AI, or computational methods. And this is given that actually today there are like huge piles of digitized historical materials. There's not a clear vision of how to interrogate those materials at scale. This already is like a situation that persists for 20 years, basically. It's not new, it's already there from the early 2000s that this contrast is there. And this situation is partly a result of older debates in the 70s and 80s, which kind of pushed history away from statistical analysis or quantitative analysis and pushed it, like made it a really qualitative discipline. So history became about narrative and not about numbers. And this is actually still like present today. And so for a while, I think there was maybe some hostility, but today, I think historians are kind of usually less skeptic about digital analysis, but the greatest obstacle, as a colleague and friend of mine, Luke Blaxell, recently mentioned in an article, so the greatest obstacle of using digital skills in history is like apathy and ambivalence. So what I fear most is actually not hostility, but just disinterestedness or silence. And when historians talk about the computational turn, it's always in the future tense somehow. So they think there's some future for digital skills or digital research, but it's not yet there. But also this future tense is already been used for 20 or longer. So we keep on using this future tense. And I think thinking about skills can kind of form a solution to this kind of problem. So I was thinking, what skills do we actually need to kind of bring history together with data science? And firstly, I think it's good to argue that maybe these are not always digital skills. So I think we also need strong rhetorical and even maybe psychological skills to convince historians about digital analysis. And what I think is absolutely critical is how to turn numbers into a convincing narrative, how being able to negotiate between numbers and narrative, be a bit like diplomatic there. And what I think is also maybe important that we kind of, when teaching digital skills in humanities and history more specifically, we maybe overemphasize the role of coding. So I think coding is actually probably a less critical skill than especially for the future. So when it comes to coding, we should maybe be more able to read and write, but not able to read, but not less to write. So what are then I see the more critical skills? So I think what we should put more emphasis on is thinking about computational methods and what does computational methods mean in the context of humanities research. And one book that really influenced me was called Statistical Rethinking by Richard McIlwraith. So it's an introduction to Bayesian statistics. It's very fascinating. But it's interesting because it puts science, it's written for scientists, it puts science before statistics. And I think we also need something similar for humanities and history. So we should do statistics, but we should put our humanities interest first and then develop the methods or like use the methods, but building on our domain knowledge and use our prior knowledge when we use statistical methods. Secondly, I think we should cherish interdisciplinarity. So I feel that collaboration requires interdisciplinarity. So we need more interdisciplinary scholars because collaboration between like a historian and like sometimes someone pure technical won't really work. So we need more interdisciplinarity, but also acknowledge that basically this means also developing as a historian and a data scientist, not just becoming more data sciencey. And lastly, I think what we should focus on what I see as maybe the most essential skill is to think, again, not really about the code, but more about the research design as a whole. So the greatest skill, I think, is learning to ask the right question, learning to reason with data and algorithms, and craft an argument from this reasoning. So again, like asking the question is the greatest skill, and also in this term, I like to finish like saying that simplicity is also key. So, and this kind of conflicts with like, there's always this push to work with the state of the art. Maybe for history, we should maybe think what's the simplest way to prove something. And we should keep our audience in mind and try to like we're always dealing with people when writing and doing history. So lastly, so we don't need like bleeding edge experiments, we need like relevant and good research outcomes.
Thank you, Kaspar. I'm going to cling on to that. Ask the right question and keep it simple. Superb. OK. Whilst I'm still waiting for your questions to work their way through to me, our final guest. So Nicole Coleman. Nicole, welcome. Nicole's digital research architect for the Stanford University Libraries and research director for Humanities and Design, a research lab at the Center for Spatial and Textual Analysis. Nicole works at the intersection of the digital library and digital scholarship as a lead architect in the design and development of practical research services. She is currently leading an initiative with the library to identify and enact applications of artificial intelligence. Is this machine perception, machine learning, machine reasoning, and language recognition to make the collection of maps, photographs, manuscripts, datasets, and other assets more easily discoverable, accessible, and analyzable. And we've got some East-West US thing going on here. So Nicole, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I'm going to end up echoing a lot of what we've already heard from the other guests today. So I am in the library. That would be maybe something that distinguishes my role. So Stanford Libraries, of course, the library serves disciplines across the entire university. But there is an emphasis on work in humanities, support for humanities and social science research. And so I would say the most significant development for us is Collections as Data, which is a program that started, I think, about a decade ago. And just in April of this year, there was a big event in Vancouver, international event that was a summit, really thinking about what's the state of Collections as Data and where does it go from here. And I will just make a plug. There's a fantastic kind of report, statements from a number of different individuals who have participated in this program. But what we mean by collections as data is really starting to think about these holdings in libraries as something that are available for computation. And that it's not easy to do. It can be very, very challenging. So right now at Stanford Libraries, for example, we do make large corpora available to researchers who are interested in working with, say, large text corpora or maybe even large image collections. But those are the more rare individuals, and we are not set up, let's say, to offer materials at scale that way. Libraries typically are oriented very much to delivering single objects, just as they were with physical materials. That transferred over to the digital space. So taking advantage of this is a challenge, but something that it also provides opportunities not only for serving researchers, but really for serving librarians themselves. I have been a big advocate for power tools for librarians, giving librarians who maybe aren't going to be data scientists or aren't going to learn programming themselves, giving them access to the tools to do analysis on their collections, to understand more about those collections, and also to maybe rethink what is a digital collection. What are the qualities of a digital collection that are different than what it means to both select for and offer up materials when you're thinking of them as individual objects. So the challenges, I guess, for us, as I mentioned, first of all, thinking in terms of things individually, we have entire, information systems that are just oriented around that. And while we can provide APIs, it turns out that for many people, APIs are just not enough. They're not sufficient. So we're slowly moving in the direction of improving things and learning a lot in the process from researchers. So I do have the great opportunity to work at the Center for Spatial and Textual Analysis. I also have a number of colleagues within the library, within a group called Research Data Services, and groups like this I think are becoming more common within libraries, who do a lot of work offering training and instruction in data science and data visualization and programming and so forth, often to graduate students and undergraduates, and lots of support. So what we're starting to see the trends change. We're starting to see more and more students move in the direction of interest in working with materials this way, because of course, in the humanities and in social sciences, well, in the humanities in particular, very often you are returning over and over again to the same materials. So innovative new approaches, ways of seeing that material in a different way become really, really important. And I would say that the most important thing for us to, I guess, like, sort of critical skills that need to be developed, and this is as much for students as it is for librarians themselves, is really, it's, as you were saying, it's about design. I would say it's about how do we design systems, almost more important than thinking about underlying programming or the transformation of these collections, is how do we design engagement with those systems. That's something that's really interesting. And I think you mentioned ChatGPT. I mean, so even something as simple as, not simple maybe, but that easy to understand as something like prompt engineering. I think that maybe we shouldn't be thinking of that as an engineering exercise, but more as a kind of conversational, engagement with machine. How do we think critically about these collections as data and think differently about what it means to get access to them?
Thank you, Nicole. Collections and data. Superb. So we've got enthusiastic people, we've got collections and data, we've got simple questions, ethics. We should be making this all happen. So thank you again to all the panel. Please submit your questions through the chat. They're not making their way through to my iPad. Maybe they should be. They've just unlocked. Okay, oh, goodness me. I'm going to digest this lot, but I'm going to ask a question of everybody quickly, and then I'll come to the questions from the audience. And thank you. Keep them flowing. So my question is this to the panel. A lot of what came up is interdisciplinary working. So if AI and data science is sort of typically housed in the silo of science and technology, what should institutions, what should universities be doing to enable those conversations outside of those? I'll give the panel, discuss amongst yourselves for 5 minutes, and I'll come to the other chat.
I guess one thing I've always been frustrated when I was working in a pure university environment was the departmental way of thinking. The computer scientists live over there, the statisticians live over there, and here are the biologists, here are the historians. I think that's so limiting. And I now work in a group that's a big jumble of people, and I think that's a really useful way of actually building new tools. I think that's something that I found really good.
I think it also should be like a platform for asking stupid and simple questions when you start.
Yes.
I thought this was absolutely, because when I started, I had very simple needs, but for them at this point they were very difficult for me. So having kind of access to kind of start with baby steps is very useful actually.
Yeah.
And to build on what you say about departmental approaches, taking into this habit to present what we are doing a bit more, because I came across so many very interesting projects that I never learned about before, just by hearing someone talking, I did that, oh wow, that's amazing, maybe something a bit similar could be applied to my institution or my museum, or and then we start to have a better idea to who we should talk to and who we should, I don't know, imitate or contact.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. I think really good documentation and close instructions about how to is incredibly valuable for people. It just provides a level of access for individuals that who might feel more uncomfortable or feel as if their questions are too simple or too stupid, to be able to see step by step how to build something, how to do something is really exciting and liberating.
And also I would add that the institutional support aspect of what Kaspar was saying with asking simple questions and knowing that even though interdisciplinary research is amazing and full of opportunities, it also does take longer because we're having to learn how to communicate with each other and learn from each other so that then we can really, make new things happen.
Super. Okay, I'm keen to turn to the questions from the audience. Thank you, audience. Okay, I've got one here from Louise. I'm going to cherry pick it a little bit here. Translation assistants are also a massive issue because they may have functional use, but their limitations are tremendous. And AI, it seems to me, Louise, is currently excluding people rather than proving to be inclusive. Most of what we're talking about seems to be taking an English language Anglo-American perspective. How inclusive outside of English language sphere is AI? Excellent question. Would anybody like to have a stab at that? Go ahead.
Well, there are some robot translators that have been trained on specific languages. So there have been like some experiments in some museums with like local languages, for instance. So that may be like a form of overcoming those challenges, but it's absolutely true. And it's the same with labeling in museums. We always want to address everyone, but that's a real barrier. I'm not a specialist on those AI in language, so I know it's a barrier. I'm always advocating for human contact as well. So I think we should find a way for both to be, I don't know, combinated, or I don't know if it answers the question, but yes, there are some biases. There are also some local experiences that are trying to overcome that. I don't have an overview of what could be done to answer that problem.
Any other perspectives?
I've been using some AI for Scottish Gaelic, which has been really fun, especially when I don't know the language myself, because that's not my field. But building a tool that means other people can actually build a better data set. So one of the big problems with Scottish Gaelic is there is not a big data set to train from. But if you can reach the people who are actively speaking it and using it in education, that can build up a better training set that AI can then be used for better purposes. So I think, yeah, you can actually reach people better using AI and cool tools, and that's the part that works really well, I think.
And is it fair to say they're sort of human in the loop, and it is the native speakers?
Exactly.
So it's not some Anglo people
Exactly.
say, this is how it's said. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
There is the problem, though, I think, as this questioner is pointing out, that we are, in large part, often too reliant on tools that have been developed, in corporate environments where they're thinking about bottom line and largest market share and that sort of thing. And I think we do have an opportunity as well as a responsibility within cultural heritage to be thinking about reaching out to folks across the spectrum and not making it so English centric.
Quite right. I think AI should lift everybody equally. That's an opinion. Okay, the comments are coming in. Keep them flying in, and we're going to present them as much as we can. So Joseph here says several people have indicated that they had to train themselves. So they're curious, where should one start? What training and resources are now available? Who has a good positive journey to explain? Lydia, we'll start with you, please.
So I started in the field of zoology, and I was not taught any programming or anything at school or in my undergraduate. And then I went into a field of Ph.D., which was half biology and half engineering, and I had to suddenly learn to code out of nowhere. And I first taught myself by reading other people's code, which is a nightmare because they were really difficult to understand, and it was really frustrating. But the part that I found really useful when trying to teach myself was I had a goal in mind. There was a project I really wanted to unlock some of the data I was working on and actually get to the bottom of some of the big questions I had. And I couldn't do that by hand, and I couldn't do it myself. I needed help from the computer. So I think whenever anyone's teaching themselves, I think having some purpose in mind is so critical, because that's what really pushes you and helps. So yeah, once I got to grips with it. But that first experience of trying to read other people's code did end up being really helpful, because I realized that code ultimately is not for computers, it's for other people. What you're writing is for other people to read and understand. And so now when I teach students and also early career researchers and also professors and PIs, we do kind of keep that in mind. You're trying to communicate with other people in your field who might read your work. And the Turing Way has been really helpful for that. So if you are a researcher, do use that resource. It's got loads of different ways of thinking about coding. And there are, of course, lots of tutorials. But I think having a good project in mind is what really helps when you're self-teaching.
Absolutely. My experience was very similar to what Lydia's describing. And I would also add that having a community around you who is also doing the same thing. So I had several friends who were in the same boat as me. We did not have a background in coding. We were all in linguistics and needed to access a larger data set to ask way cooler questions than just doing it by hand. And so specifically, we were all using the R programming language and worked with R Ladies, which was and is a group that promotes diversity in the R programming language. And so having that community also of people online worldwide you can ask questions to, that makes a huge difference as well, along with the project goal in line. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kaspar,
I can tell
please.
people what not to do.
Yeah, let's have that.
When I tried to learn to code, I remember I cycled to the bookshop and bought like this 1,000-page book using Python from Lutz. And I started at page 1 and went to page 550 something. So, but it actually was totally useless because it's not like you don't. But to make a bigger point, you don't learn to code or you don't learn the skills by really bottom up. What I later learned is you need to find like someone to partner up with, or like someone who can help you, like a person. Again, code is also about people. But then also to kind of, I made a mistake that I had to learn. I thought I had to learn everything from scratch, but actually what you should find is if you find that someone did something interesting, that you find interesting, then try to learn this particular thing. Like if someone used a machine learning model for something cool, try to rebuild what they did. And then you can actually, you don't understand what you're doing, but if you do it for long enough, you will at some point. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to connect this question with another one that we've had in from Alan. So Alan's talking about what opportunities for mentorship have helped you. And I'm actually going to extend that question and perhaps what opportunities should there be for mentorship for the next generation? So you said it was about people, so did Lydia. So panel, what mentorship should be out there perhaps, and what's worked for you?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I didn't really have a community behind me, and I found that really difficult. And as soon as I was around other people who were learning, that made a huge difference. So now I like to try and show and prove that, yes, you can get things wrong, and yes, you can forget all of your commands, and yes, you can kind of not really understand that part of the code, but you can still kind of work with it. I think showing that humanness element, I think, is really critical. People put coding on some kind of pedestal of this is terrifying maths that I can never understand, but I think being able to show that you can play around with it and trial and error, I think that's a really, really critical part of mentorship, and showing it's okay to get things wrong.
Any others?
Yeah, what I also remember was actually helped with me is that we felt a bit like the outcast of the humanities department. we were kind of, it is also kind of mentorship. We were kind of like sticking together, and then like some other people really,
The adverse.
this kind of mentality helped me through it, and yeah.
Excellent. Okay, I've got a couple of questions around a similar theme. So Nicola and Ruth are asking, the narrative is often about AI aiding research in other disciplines. AI is the savior. But reversing that, and that is sort of almost what today is about, is what can AI and data science, how can we improve that if it gets into dialogue with other disciplines? So, you know, what should be happening going the other way? Where are there opportunities to improve things? Maybe, Katie, I'll start with you. You were critical of ChatGPT, and rightly. Do you want to expand upon some of those things about how, perhaps, linguistics can improve large language models, and then we'll expand it out to the rest of the panel?
Yeah, well, a large language model like ChatGPT is only based on probabilities with a certain number of words. And if you compare that, and I'm stealing this from my advisor, Bill Kretschmar, if you compare that to the average experience of an individual person in 1 year, so that is only 40 million words. That's how many words we experience in 1 year. In a lifetime, it's 3 billion words. That is still more than the number of words that ChatGPT is based off of. So linguists can offer examples like that to understanding how language works, how language operates, which is very different than probabilities based on one specific or a certain language situation, like internet or Reddit data, for example.
Yeah.
Linguists study language in every possible context, whether it's talking to your grandmother or letters written in the 18th century. I mean, so they can offer that more complex understanding to then improve the models.
Anyone else want to take a stab at this, Nicole?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it is very helpful to step back from the hype and recognize that, as you were saying, we're in a phase right now where we're really just focused on predictive models, and this happens to be fairly successful. But fairly successful is really a matter of what's your measure of success? What are you trying to accomplish? And that's where, I come back to this idea of the importance of design, and a number of folks here have mentioned this idea of the importance of domain expertise bringing to the questions. I mean, there's a lot that can be done. I think there's a rather myopic view of putting AI in front as a problem solver. We're the problem solvers. It's simply a tool. How can we learn to make the best use of this tool in ways that are, ethical and supportive of others? Yeah.
One thing that could be a bit scary about when you prompt something like ChatGPT to tell you something about it. Sometimes you also forget to, I'm thinking about being in a museum here, for instance. If you have something that is saying to you that's how you should see that, or that's how you should interpret that, well, it will automatically suppress with that, authoritative voice what you are feeling inside. And so maybe we should also use it, as you said, as tools, but that could be at the service of more understanding of different experiences or different interpretations, and build more, interesting discourses around places or objects or concepts.
Fascinating. I'm going to ask the crew if we're going to run 5 minutes over, because they give people their full hour's worth of money. Okay, we're going to 5 past. I'm going to try and weave together 3 questions here, so bear with me. Why did I say I would share this? Okay, so Bernard says, I often find people asking about how to acquire software engineering skills, but very little about acquiring humanities skills. Are there resources available? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, super. Anna says, surely it's really important that non-STEM sciences adapt and learn from computational skills. So they're sort of arguing, let's just learn from each other. So really, I think maybe David here has got it here. How important is it to understand multiple disciplines compared to perhaps just sort of being able to collaborate and trust somebody from another discipline? So you've all had different experiences. How important is it to have a grasp of it all yourself versus find the right collaborators? Lydia, you look like you want to have a go.
Having to kind of work with engineers, mathematicians, biomedical people in the same room, you can't learn all of their disciplines just to have a conversation. It's not going to happen. But I think it is good to kind of, the more conversations you have with people outside of your discipline, you start to recognize, oh, that person's got this kind of brain or this way of seeing the world. So you're not going to get a scientist speaking from an engineer point of view. They have a completely different perspective. And you can recognize that even if you do not understand all of the background of engineering. And the same way you can get that from AI scientists or computer scientists. They have a way of looking at the world that is actually different to your own. So I think it does both. Just by collaborating, you start to see these perspectives and get a grip on it. But there's no way you're going to be able to understand all of the disciplines just to work together. So I think with disciplinary stuff, it's just keep having big conversations with big groups of people.
Also, collaborating will make that really nice thing to you, and you will actually start to question your points of view, your bias, the things that are so evident in your field that you don't take the opportunity to take a step on the side or to look through different lenses. This is what I love by talking to other people from other disciplines. Like, I look to what I think is evident, what I know from another perspective, and I'm like, oh, no, that's not evident at all. It should be made understandable in another way. Yes.
Yeah. So Katie, Kaspar, Nicole, you all work with other people, trying to sort of inspire their work and research. What's a successful collaboration to you?
I think if you can make people uncomfortable, like if people step out of their own kind of discipline, I think then you have a kind of successful collaboration. So I think this discussion also very much, I think, depends on the discipline. I would say within history, I think it's good that people have interdisciplinary skills, like so you don't get this kind of dividing world phenomenon. But I think, and partly I think we should also say, I don't think interdisciplinary work is the most efficient way of working, but in the end the most fruitful. So this is...
And I would say too, my background is in corpus linguistics, which is specifically, it works really well with different disciplines, geographers, legal scholars, and it lends itself to that, but it only works well if everybody can explain and understand what the evidence is showing through the data and through the methods, and so that you have clear, whether it's a finding or research questions related to it. So that does make it take longer. So research design, like Kaspar was saying earlier, is also very key. Yeah.
I was going to quickly say, I think within a discipline, that form of communication is often not really rewarded. It's not pushed towards the ability to speak beyond the people in the room who already know your field. That's not something you're trained in, and it's not rewarded within the field. So it's something you have to practice and actually try it in person and seeing the rewards of it. But making sure everyone is on the same page takes a long time, and it's a lot of effort to be able to understand and make sure that we are all speaking the same kind of language. That does take a really long time, yeah.
And I hope that's going to change. I mean, I see it changing. You know, I've been in this game for a while, and I see it changing. And it's nice to be able to counter some of the fear and anxiety that's sort of in the public discourse around applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and hear, you know, from folks on the panel today how this can also be, in the right context, an opportunity really to bring people into dialogue and to rethink our relationships to each other through the technology.
Yeah.
Amazing answers there. I'm going to take a slight practical turn here, and Joseph's asked a couple of questions. I'll try and combo them together a little bit. So people talk about data and AI, big data and AI. How much data is really needed to exploit AI properly? And I'll combo that up with the second question, which was, what services can be used to sort of do AI in an inexpensive fashion, without training perhaps your own large language model? Who would like to have a go at that? Well, one half of the question.
Well, there are open source models available, and it's much better to work with those if you can. Of course. Commercial products like, you know, OpenAI, it's sort of in their interest to make things very, very easy, right, to lower the bar. But I think we're getting better at documenting and helping and providing sort of support for people to be able to use open source tools. And I think that even though that's more challenging, just as we were saying, collaboration by itself is also more challenging, the rewards are much greater there, because what I think what we want to be doing in the long run is being able to contribute to something, being able to understand the materials, the tools that we're working with, and not feel that we are dependent on some commercial model that we don't really have any control over.
And are there any particular websites or services you point people towards to sort of start that journey?
There's GPT for all, I think.
GPT for all?
Yeah, that's an open source GPT that you can train on your own documents, that kind of thing. But yeah, this is a kind of battle that's kind of waging on, the open source versus the proprietary. And I think when I've been working on tools that are open from the research point of view, I think people do start to see the real value in being able to see behind the curtain and see how things actually work. And I think the public is becoming more aware of the fact that we don't know what Google are doing or Meta, but when we have research that is actually more open, digital humanities, where people can see how things work, I think it is a better form of communication, a better way of doing research as well. Yeah.
And also another kind of resource like Hugging Face is like a large language model leaderboard, which you have like an overview about it. But I also think like, I think you must also ask like, in what situation do you actually need this kind of model? And also, even if you can download it, it's like quite unlikely you will be able to run it, because unless you have a very big computer at home or at your institute. So yeah, I think also in this case I would also argue for minimalism. Like also, if you don't have a lot of data, why should you bother? And you can actually be a perfectly good scientist or researcher without it.
In terms of open source languages, also both R and Python have a lot of support and resources worldwide. So I would recommend those as well.
So it's about that community again.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, I want to turn to a question from Jennifer here, who says, returning to a point Kaspar and Mathilde both brought up in slightly different ways, I'd love to hear more strategies for sharing AI and digital skills with broader audiences. Example, the public, resistant faculty, or we know them, unrepresented or marginalized groups, etc. And I think that's primarily perhaps to you two, but also to the whole panel. This is a very positive question.
Do you want to start, or?
Yeah, I think I need to think about I think it's always good to try to put yourself in your, I wouldn't say opponent, but let's say the person you want to convince's feet. And I think one problem with AI and even with digital humanities is that it's often been kind of evangelical. It has seen itself as like the progress. And I think this is not necessarily, without actually really proving it necessarily. So I think we should be self-critical, like, and especially when we talk to others, that like these technologies can be useful, but we're also very self-aware that they are also flaws in many ways. So we should kind of start a conversation in like a more self-critical way and not like kind of positioning ourselves that what we're doing is necessarily the future. And especially when dealing with, let's say, stuff, it's just not very convinced of digital skills.
Yeah, I would add to that maybe we should try to figure out together how AI could be a tool to weirdly make us more human in the way we think about the things, and especially this idea of progress. I like that you touched on that, because progress for progress is interesting, nice, or it can make us very curious, but I don't think it makes always sense. That was what I was saying about, it's new, or AI is new, we should incorporate that in our galleries, for instance. Yes, but to do what? To achieve what? If we really want to bring community together, for instance, that could be something that is really meaningful, and we could then figure out together how we can do that, and maybe AI can help. Maybe it's not the right tool, and that's not a problem.
I think it is. It's an exciting moment when there's sort of new technology available. But I think, as you say, and we've mentioned, thinking about putting, I guess, in front of that, designing a solution to, identifying a problem, if there is a problem, or an opportunity. It doesn't have to be a problem. It can just be an opportunity for some kind of innovation, and really thinking about designing the best way to approach that first before the technology comes. So technology can be inspiring, but as you say, may not be the right thing. But what that also does is it empowers people who are domain experts, that even if they're not necessarily as familiar with the technology, or they don't write code, there's a very important role of really thinking through how do we address this? What are the steps to take? What are the best ways of implementing a technology?
I have a really fun anecdote from the Natural History Museum in London, where they've been programming robots with AI to take photographs of beetle samples, because there's only about 4 or 5 people left in the world who can identify them, and they're all in their late 80s, so they're going to pass away soon. So it's using AI to make sure that those top humans can see the samples quickly before that they are gone. So it's a kind of, it's just exactly like that, using AI as a tool to give them the samples that they need to see as quickly as possible. So it's not the AI taking anyone's job, it's helping someone to work faster.
Okay, we said we'd run on We said we'd run on 5 extra minutes just because we started a little bit late. So I'm going to, let's assume, and who's to say they're not, that UKRI funders are in the room and listening. Have you got any particular requests from the UK scene? You know, what should we be doing differently? Because we know we're on the cusp of something exciting. What change would you like to see? Just something short and snappy from Lydia. We'll start at you.
Recognizing that great research ideas might not come under one departmental bracket. The fact that you can submit a grant application and they'll go, well, is this history or is this computer science or is this biology or is it engineering? I think that holds back so much research, and I don't think that's a good idea.
Yes, I would say support interdisciplinary research that includes humanities.
Yeah.
Mathilde, what's on your shopping list?
No, but it was actually the same idea, like support project that, for instance, if someone from a field needs the skills from someone from another field, AI or not AI, just like allow those kind of projects happen. And because I'm sure there are so many outcomes to be seen from those projects.
And I think also maybe support different career paths in academia and research, also and also maybe have more people outside of academia engage with research. And yes, I think this is.
I want to underscore all of those same points too. I mean, the importance of interdisciplinarity is key, but let me just add from the library perspective, make sure to also make sure to factor in infrastructure, support for infrastructure to protect, preserve, and document the kind of data and the models behind this. And I mean, in fact, the entire research program, those being only a piece of it. But that kind of infrastructure is something that we desperately need support for. The current models are not appropriate to this new way of working, and we need to adapt.
And that digital research infrastructure means things like compute, storage, and the skills. So there's no point in having those other two without somebody to drive it.
That's right.
And without the questions.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to wrap up there. Thank you so much to my amazing panel. Thank you for joining us. To Lydia, to Katie, to Mathilde, to Kaspar, to Nicole. Thank you so much. The feedback online has been amazing as well, so I'll share the positive stuff with you later. Thanks very much to the Living with Machines research project. You can find out more at livingwithmachines.ac.uk. And of course, the Alan Turing Institute at turing.ac.uk. And this couldn't happen without our funders, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, who hopefully their ears were pricked up a little bit, and we have a shopping list for you. Thanks to Lele, Demetzi for setting this up, and all the crew at Unique Media TV. Thank you so much. There's just as many people behind the scenes as you see in front of you. Most of all, though, thank you to you, the audience, for taking an hour out of your busy day to listen to us, to think about what you've heard, and to present your questions. Keep that dialogue going. Find us on Twitter. Find us on the social media platforms. It just remains for me to say thank you again to the amazing panel, and have an amazing rest of today. Thank you.